guys, I'm Emiline, aka Winterstar Cosplay, and in this video I'm going to be giving you all the tips and tricks for things that I wish I had known when I started teaching panels at Comic Cons. I started teaching panels at online conventions in early to mid 2020, and I started teaching in-person conventions in 2021. It's been an awesome experience and I've learned a lot while doing it, so here is some of my advice to help make your first panel teaching experience a good one. To start off, one of the most important things to know is the expectations of the convention and the panel itself. How long will your panel be? In what room? Will you be teaching with anybody else, or will it be just you? Will you need to bring your own cables to connect to a screen? Will there even be a screen? Finding out the answers to all of these questions can really help you with preparing to teach your first ever panel. And it's definitely worth talking to whoever's in charge, usually the panel programming team, to find out the answers to these questions. Because once you know what the expectations are and how to meet them, you can better prepare for your panel itself. Which brings me to my next bit of advice. Prepare beforehand. I cannot emphasize this enough. You need to prepare before you actually go to teach your panel. You need to know what you're teaching and have a basic idea of how you are going to teach it if you want your panel to be a success. Going along with this, make sure that you know where your panel room is and that you get there early, just in case you need to work out some issues with connecting your computer to the screen because technology is often faulty. In addition to that, I found that it's super helpful to have some kind of outline when you're teaching your panel. Whether you have a full script written out or just a set of notes and bullet points, it's totally up to you. Find something that works for you and your teaching method. I find it more helpful to have a set of notes and bullet points rather than a full-out written script that I just read from, because if you're just constantly looking down and reading straight off of a sheet of paper, then it doesn't make for as good of a convention, and people can really just tell that you're standing there just reading a sheet of paper to them. That is why I found it's a great idea to have an outline for your panel instead. In my experience, having a full script of every single word you want to say isn't as helpful, since if you lose your place or go off on a tangent talking about something else, then it can be really hard to find your place again and you might just fumble around for a few seconds before you find where you're at. Plus, you don't really want to sound like you're just reading off of a script. It doesn't sound as good when you're talking to a large group of people or even a small group of people, and nobody really wants to listen to that. Unless you're a really good script reader, then by all means just go ahead. I do occasionally have a full script written out for my panels that I teach, but I don't usually read it word for word. Instead, I use that as a guide to know what I want to talk about and how I might want to talk about it. Going back and forth between looking up at the audience and actually talking to them, and glancing quickly back down at the notes and script I made so that I can remember where I am and where I want to go next. There's a ton of different ways to make scripts and outlines for panels, and it's totally up to you what you decide to do. It's a good idea to try a couple different things maybe before you actually go and teach your panel so you can find which method works best for you. And whenever you do have a script or outline finished, try going through it a couple of times before the actual convention starts. That way you can know how long it's going to take you, if everything flows together well, or if there's any changes or adjustments you need to make. Of course, even if you have the most precise, word-for-word, minute-by-minute outline ever, things can get changed pretty quickly on the fly. If a discussion gets started or somebody asks a really good question that you feel the need to talk about more, your panel outline can go right out the window, and that is totally okay. Honestly, I love when people start asking questions and a whole discussion gets started because, in my opinion, it makes for a more interesting panel. It can be helpful to try and anticipate what kind of questions people might ask so you can think of the answers for them beforehand. Although, if somebody asks a question that you don't know the answer to, it's totally okay to just say that. You might say something along the lines of, "That's a really good question. I don't know the answer to that right off the top of my head, but here's the answer to a similar question," or "Here's how you might find that answer out for yourself." Alternatively, you could ask if somebody else in the audience knows the answer. Talking with your audience, in my opinion, it makes for a better and more engaged panel with people who are actually more interested in learning and discussing rather than just sitting there drifting off into space. But if you do want people to engage and ask questions and offer answers to other people's questions, you need to let them know early on that that's okay. Before the panel actually starts, maybe chat with the people there, ask them how their con day is going, let them know that it's okay to ask questions. That way, they don't wonder if they're even allowed to halfway through the panel. Unless, of course, you don't want anybody else to talk or say anything, which is totally fine. If that's how you want to do your panel, you absolutely do that. Earlier, I mentioned that it was important to know beforehand if you would have a screen to display slides at your panel. The reason for this being, if you have a slideshow presentation prepared, you need to know if you can actually go and use it. But let's assume for the sake of this video that your panel will have a way for you to display a slideshow. How do you make sure that your slideshow is a good one? First, let's establish what you should not do for a slideshow. Do not just have large chunks of text on the screen that you just straight up read off. This has the same effect of just reading from a script, and if people wanted to read what was written on the screen, they could just look up at it. They don't actually need you to read it for them. What you should do is use your slideshow to underline what you're already saying. Maybe a few bullet points, a website people could visit, a few small bits of text, a diagram, or a picture. All of these work great to underline what you're already saying without you having to put a huge amount of text on the screen that you just read off. Your slideshow should be something that you can gesture at and talk about to help other people in the audience visualize what you're trying to say. For instance, for my cosplay on a budget panel that I taught at FanX earlier this year, I had an hour-long panel and I used less than 10 slides for it. One of my slides simply read budgeting in big letters. It was a way to help remind me where I was in my panel and where I wanted to go next, as well as help indicate to my audience what I was going to start talking about. A win for all of us. So your panel goes along with your script or outline that you made beforehand, but if you get off track, if you go off on a tangent, or if people start a really good discussion, it's okay if your panel doesn't end up exactly like your outline. Because if people are asking about something and your audience is having a really good discussion with you, that's what they want to learn about and that's what they want to talk about. You don't have to try and force the conversation away from that just to get back to some other point in your panel. Unless that point is a really important one that you do feel like you need to cover. But just don't stress too much if you don't cover everything that you mean to. It's okay if you talk about something completely different than you originally planned to. As somebody who has taught panels and records YouTube videos, it's almost impossible to stay entirely on script all the time, and that is totally okay. Something that I feel like a lot of people worry about when they're preparing to teach their panel is the whole public speaking aspect of it. What if you mess up? What if you say something wrong and people just laugh at you? In my experience, 9 times out of 10, people will sympathize with you rather than scorn you. Because most of us have had to speak in public at one time or another, and most of us actually kind of hate it. So seeing you up there, teaching everybody, acting confident and very sure of yourself will give other people inspiration and they will sympathize with you rather than make fun of you. That being said, I have had audiences laugh at me before, but that's because I'm making fun of myself and I'm laughing too. So we're laughing together. If you can laugh with your audience rather than just your audience laughing at you, then it's a better experience for everybody. Kind of going off of that, if you feel nervous and like you don't know what you're doing, just pretend like you do. Just act confident and sure of yourself and like this was the plan the entire time. And since the people in the audience can't actually see your outline, they'll never know. Maybe that whole tangent you went off of was something that you meant to do the entire time. Just act confident and like you know what you're doing, and you will feel more confident and happy to be there. And remember, everybody who's attending your panel wants to be there. They had the whole convention to choose from and they chose you. They want to be there and they're ready to learn and they're cheering for you. So don't worry too much about what they might be thinking, because most of the time it's just all good things. But despite all that, nerves and stage fright can still be a very real thing, so I recommend that before your panel you take a few minutes to step outside and calm yourself down. Find some way that makes you feel calm and more confident and sure of yourself. Maybe it's getting hyped up by a friend, maybe it's watching some funny videos or making confident poses at yourself in the mirror, maybe it's meditating. For me, it's usually getting hyped up by a family member or saying a quick prayer. Find what works for you and helps you feel more calm and confident when you're teaching your panel. And there you go, all of the tips and tricks I have for helping you have a good experience teaching your first panel. I hope that you found this video helpful, and if you did, that you'll like and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any future cosplay, convention, or nerdy content. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.
I'm so tired, but we had to film this today, so...